Happy WTF weekend, or end of the weekend, I guess, YouTube. But I think it's now officially time for concern in Leafland. um, Probably not, but the trends I'm seeing out of this team over the last handful of games are continuing to proliferate, and it's not great. I actually didn't get around to posting. I should have had two post-game summaries done over the weekend, but my son's show closed this weekend, and it was crazy, and I didn't even see the Ottawa game, to be honest. And so here I am now doing two games. The first game was at home to the Flyers, and true to form lately, the Leafs got down early, but were able to come back and get a goal near the end of the period to make things 1-1, which is okay. They come out of the first period tied. No matter how many goals are scored, I'm fine with that because their starts have been brutal. But then in the second period, Philly comes out and scores 2 goals to make it 3-1. Leafs cut it to 3-2. Philly comes back, scores 2 more, makes it 5-2. At the start of the third, Leafs come out and score a bunch of goals, and eventually it's 7-5 for Toronto. And late in the game, Van Riemsdyk scores for the Flyers to make it 7-6 in this crazy finish. It's just like Fred's been not great. In the defense, suddenly they were hanging in there with those 2 injuries, but now suddenly it's just like it's open season. It's they can't keep it up, and the offense has been fine. I mean, they're scoring piles of goals each game in bunches, but everything on the defensive side of things is just brutal. And they almost came back to win that Chicago game. They did manage to come back against Philly, although it was way too close, and the final score was 7-6, which you're not going to see those kind of games in the playoffs. So all of that is very concerning. Most of all for Fred, I guess, because they're going to get their 2 defensemen back before the playoffs, and that should sort itself out to some degree. But if Freddie's not on top of his game in the playoffs, there could be trouble. And then they played Ottawa on Saturday night. Like I said, I didn't see any of it, but they lost 6-2 to a terrible friggin' team. That's not the first time they've lost to Ottawa this year. I don't know, maybe they just have their number. Maybe it's one of those strange things like Buffalo had their number for so many years, and they weren't great for a lot of them. Maybe Ottawa's got their number this year for some reason. But either way, they got down early in that game. Only 1-0, but again, it's not a great start, and it just snowballed from there. And from the looks of it, from the highlights I saw, from the stats I see, in both the Philly and the Ottawa games, the Leafs were by far the better team statistically. Better shots. The other team had to block way more shots than the Leafs did. The Leafs even out-hit one of the teams in one of the games, which is unusual. The face-offs are better. That's the one thing that I'm drawing on as the positive, is that it's not like they're coming out, Fred's been terrible, the defense is suffering, and they're not competing. They're competing. They're throwing lots of pucks at the opposition. They're just not going in. And they're taking it to teams, and they're forcing teams, but they're just not getting the results, and their defense and their goaltending is suffering. So, which I hope, this is kind of the ebbs and flows and ups and downs of an NHL season. And on a lot of the winning streaks they've had a lot of the bounces. They've had a lot of luck and stuff like that. And Fred's been really good and held them in there. And now this is maybe some of it evening out. They're going to go through a bit of a stretch here where they might lose their way a bit, but they're still competing, and they're still the better team on a lot of given nights. They're just not getting the wins like they were. So hopefully, the other bright side is that they do have a number of games left before the playoffs begin. So if they can get those 2 D-men back, they got time to sort things out. They got time for Fred to kind of put all this business behind him and hopefully get back to where he was before this kind of skid. Because they're getting, no Stanley Cup winners ever have a subpar goaltender. They always get the goaltending when they need it in the playoffs. That's the one major key to any good team is they need to have reliable goaltending. People always say that the Leafs rely too much on Fred to bail them out and stuff. Well, what good team doesn't? Name me one that doesn't, and you won't name any teams at all because there isn't. It's such a key position. I think the most key position in all of sport. That every good team has good goaltending. That's just the way it is. So, yeah, but like I said, I think there's enough time, there's enough games left where they can hopefully stabilize things and get things back to where they were before this little skid, and hopefully this bit of adversity will help them going into the playoffs, because you see a lot of teams like Tampa's flying, Boston's been flying, and you hope that they're peaking right now, and they go into the playoffs maybe on a bit of a down turn, because that's what happens a lot. A lot of times, playoff success isn't necessarily, oh, we're the best team all year and we never faltered, or we were the worst team at the start and then got good in the second half. There's ebbs and flows to each season, and every team seems to peak at some point. And it's those teams that peak in the playoffs that seem to have the deepest runs and the best chances of success. So that's what I'm really hoping, especially Boston, because that's probably who the Leafs are going to play. Is that I hope they really they've kind of peaked, and they're not going to be as hot as they have been over the last while as we head into the playoffs. Fingers crossed. But anyways, yeah, it was an ugly weekend. I mean, they got the win against Philly, but overall, there's a lot of things that need to be tightened up. But I have faith that everything's going to work out. They're too good a team to kind of, for everything to fall apart at this point, barring tons of more guys getting injured. But I think it's all going to work itself out, and they're going to get stuff rounded into shape and get everything sorted out in time for the playoffs. So I can't wait to see what happens next, and I'm hoping it's going to be good, but we will see you soon enough. Have a great night.